Having your period today means a quick trip to the store for tampons or pads. But what did medieval women do when they got their period? The answer is going to shock you, and make you incredibly grateful for modern feminine hygiene products. Today we're diving into one of history's most overlooked topics, medieval menstruation. This is mature, educational content about a natural biological process that affected half the medieval population. We'll explore the bizarre medical beliefs, dangerous practices, and shocking social consequences that medieval women faced every month. From using sheep's wool as makeshift pads to being banned from churches, medieval periods were about survival, shame, and serious health risks. Let's uncover this hidden history. Medieval people had absolutely wild theories about menstruation. They believed periods were the body's way of purging corrupt blood and evil humors. According to medieval medical texts, this blood was literally poisonous. They thought menstrual blood could kill plants, sour wine, make mirrors lose their reflection, and even cause metal to rust. Medieval medicine was based on balancing four bodily humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. They believed women's bodies were naturally colder and wetter than men's, making them prone to excess blood that needed monthly purging. This wasn't seen as natural, it was seen as a medical condition. The church taught that periods were divine punishment for Eve's sin in the Garden of Eden. Menstruating women were considered unclean according to biblical law and banned from churches, communion, touching holy objects, or even entering sacred spaces. This religious stigma shaped how medieval society treated women during their cycles. Medieval people genuinely believed menstruating women could contaminate everything they touched. Bread baked by a menstruating woman would spoil, wine would turn to vinegar, and crops would fail. These weren't just superstitions, they were accepted medical and religious facts. Many medieval communities had red tents or separate areas where menstruating women had to stay for the duration of their cycle. They couldn't cook for their families, handle food, participate in religious services, or engage in normal daily activities. Periods weren't just inconvenient, they were socially isolating and economically devastating. Medieval women used cloth rags, literally old pieces of fabric, torn-up clothing, or scraps of linen tied between their legs or held in place with rope belts. These clouts were reused over and over, washed in cold water without soap, and passed down through generations of women. Hygiene was not great. Washing these rags was a nightmare. Medieval women had to wash them in cold water. Hot water was expensive and rare. Without soap or proper disinfectants, the cloths never got truly clean. They'd hang them to dry in private, often hiding them from men who considered them disgusting and contaminated. Rural women often used moss, grass, sheep's wool, or even animal pelts as makeshift pads. These natural materials were free but completely unsanitary. Moss could contain bacteria, wool wasn't absorbent enough, and grass could cause serious irritation and cuts. Rich women had access to fine linen cloths and could afford to have servants wash them properly with heated water. Noble ladies might own several sets of menstrual cloths, allowing them to rotate and properly clean them. But even wealthy women were using essentially the same primitive methods as peasants, just with better quality materials. Many medieval women, especially working peasants, simply free-bled, letting the blood flow naturally onto their clothes, straw bedding, or the ground. This was especially common among women who couldn't afford to stop their labor for menstrual management or who couldn't afford any materials at all. Some medieval women got creative with available materials. They used strips of leather, woven plant fibers, or even hollowed-out pieces of wood as makeshift containers. Archaeological evidence suggests some women used small clay pots or vessels, though these would have been uncomfortable and impractical for daily work. Using dirty rags and unsanitary natural materials led to constant infections. Medieval women suffered from what we'd now recognize as bacterial vaginosis, UTIs, yeast infections, and worse. Many deaths attributed to women's troubles or womb sickness were likely period-related infections that turned septic. Leaving materials in place for too long, which was common when women couldn't afford replacements, could cause serious internal infections. Medieval medical records describe women dying from putrid womb disease that sounds suspiciously like what we'd now call toxic shock syndrome. Periods severely disrupted medieval women's economic lives. Female servants might lose wages during their cycles. Peasant women still had to work in fields while dealing with heavy bleeding and no proper protection, leading to embarrassment, discomfort, and health risks. Medieval marriage manuals advised husbands to completely avoid their wives during menstruation, believing contact with menstrual blood could cause disease, deformity in future children, or even impotence. This created monthly relationship strain and sexual frustration for both partners. Without regular cycles due to poor nutrition, stress, and frequent pregnancies, many medieval women were completely confused about their reproductive health. Missing periods could mean pregnancy, illness, malnutrition, or just normal medieval irregularity. This made family planning nearly impossible. Medieval women dealt with severe menstrual pain with virtually no effective relief. They suffered through cramps, headaches, and mood changes while still expected to maintain their daily responsibilities. Pain relief was primitive and often dangerous. Medieval women used herbs like pennyroyal, tansy, and rue to regulate their cycles, reduce bleeding, or ease pain. Some of these herbs were actually effective. Willow bark contains natural aspirin compounds. But others like pennyroyal were dangerous and could cause miscarriages or poisoning. Some medieval remedies were downright deadly. Women drank mixtures containing mercury, lead, or other toxic substances believing they would regulate their cycles. These treatments often caused more harm than the period symptoms they were trying to treat. For period pain, medieval women used heated stones as heating pads, took hot baths when available, or drank wine mixed with herbs. Some women practiced early forms of massage or used pressure points. These methods showed remarkable ingenuity given their limited resources. Medieval period remedies included wearing certain gemstones like bloodstone or ruby, reciting specific prayers, carrying blessed objects, or performing rituals during certain moon phases. While medically useless, these practices provided psychological comfort and a sense of control. Experienced older women and midwives were repositories of menstrual knowledge. They passed down remedies, techniques, and wisdom through informal networks. This women-only knowledge sharing was crucial for survival but was often viewed with suspicion by male authorities. A girl's first period marked her transition to womanhood and immediate marriage eligibility. Medieval girls often married shortly after menarche, sometimes as young as 12 to 14, meaning they dealt with periods as children while also facing adult responsibilities like pregnancy and household management. Medieval guilds and professions systematically excluded women during their unclean times. Female bakers couldn't work during periods because people believed their touch would spoil bread. Female brewers were banned from handling beer. This discrimination had serious economic consequences. Periods had devastating economic consequences for medieval women. Lost work days meant lost wages. Medical expenses for infections could bankrupt families. The cost of materials, even simple rags, was significant for poor families. This created a monthly financial burden that men never faced. Some medieval legal codes actually addressed menstruation. Women couldn't give testimony in court during their periods because they were considered mentally unstable. Property transactions involving women could be delayed if they occurred during menstruation. Periods affected women's legal rights. Medieval society created a vicious cycle of shame around periods. Women were taught to hide them completely, never discuss them with men, and view them as evidence of their spiritual inferiority. This shame prevented women. Medieval women living in close quarters, nuns in convents, servants in castles, or large families, often experienced synchronized menstrual cycles. This created periodic women's weeks where entire communities of women would be considered unclean simultaneously. Medieval women's cycles were heavily influenced by nutrition, daylight, and seasonal stress. Many women stopped menstruating entirely during winter famines or had irregular cycles during planting and harvest seasons. This made period management even more unpredictable. Some medieval witch accusations were connected to menstruation. Women who seemed to predict their cycles or had knowledge of herbal remedies were sometimes accused of supernatural powers. The association between women's blood and magic made periods dangerous in more ways than one. Medieval women living in close quarters, nuns in convents, servants in castles, or large families, often experienced synchronized menstrual cycles. This created periodic women's weeks where entire communities of women would be considered unclean simultaneously. Medieval women's cycles were heavily influenced by nutrition, daylight, and seasonal stress. Many women stopped menstruating entirely during winter famines or had irregular cycles during planting and harvest seasons. This made period management even more unpredictable. Some medieval witch accusations were connected to menstruation. Women who seemed to predict their cycles or had knowledge of herbal remedies were sometimes accused of supernatural powers. The association between women's blood and magic made periods dangerous in more ways than one.